The wind on Vareth 7 could kill a man in 3 minutes. Danny Marsh knew this because the safety training said it every single day. The temperature outside was negative 60 degrees, and the air was so thin that breathing without a mask would freeze your lungs solid. It was not a friendly planet. It was not a place where anyone wanted to live. But the rocks beneath the ice contained minerals that Earth needed badly. So people like Danny came here anyway. Danny had been on Vareth 7 for almost a year now. He worked as a maintenance technician, which meant he fixed things that broke. And on a frozen world where machines ran all day and all night, things broke constantly. The thermal drills needed new parts. The heating systems needed cleaning. The ventilation shafts needed checking. It was boring work that Danny did not mind boring. He had grown up in a small town in Minnesota, where winters lasted 6 months and excitement was rare. He knew how to be patient. He knew how to be alone. That night, the other workers stayed inside the warm barracks. They played cards and watched old movies and complained about the food that came on supply ships. Danny volunteered to check the exterior vents by himself. Someone had to do it, and he liked the quiet of the frozen world. It reminded him of home in a strange way. He put on his thermal suit, checked his oxygen levels, and stepped through the airlock into the darkness. The twin suns of Vareth 7 had set hours ago, and the only light came from his helmet lamp and the distant stars. The wind pushed against him as he walked, but his suit kept him warm enough to survive. The ventilation shafts were spread around the outside of the outpost. Hot air from inside the facility escaped through these vents, keeping the pressure balanced and the machines running smoothly. Danny's job was to make sure none of them were blocked by ice or debris. He checked the first 11 vents without finding any problems. But when he reached vent number 12, he stopped. Something was different here. The ground near the vent was scattered with broken pieces of something that glittered in his lamplight. He knelt down and picked up one of the pieces. It was curved, like part of a bowl, and it shimmered with colors of purple and gold. The surface was smooth on the inside, but rough on the outside, like the shell of an egg. Danny felt his heart beat faster. He was not a scientist, but he knew what an egg looked like. And these shell pieces were big. Whatever had hatched from them was not small. He followed the trail of broken shells toward the vent, where warm air rushed out from the facility. And there, pressed against the metal grating, he found them. 2 small creatures huddled together in the heat. They were about the size of rabbits, with scales that shifted between blue and silver as they moved. They had 4 legs, 2 small wings folded against their backs, and long tails that wrapped around each other. Their eyes were large and bright, like polished gems, and when Danny's light fell on them, they made small sounds of fear. Dragons. That was the word that came to Danny's mind. They looked like dragons from the old stories his grandmother used to tell him. But dragons were not real. Dragons were fairy tales. These creatures were something else, something that should not exist on a frozen mining planet at the edge of known space. One of the hatchlings made a crying sound. It was shaking badly, and Danny could see frost forming on its scales despite the warm air from the vent. The other one was in even worse shape. Its eyes were half closed, and its breathing was slow and shallow. They were dying. Whatever warmth the vent provided was not enough to save them. Danny knew he should call for help. He should report this to the science team. Let the experts handle it. That was the correct procedure. That was what the rules said to do, but the rules would take time. The science team would want to study the situation before acting. They would have meetings and discussions while these 2 small creatures froze to death in the snow. Danny unzipped the front of his thermal suit. The cold hit his chest immediately, but he ignored it. He created a pocket of space against his body, where his own warmth and the suit's heating elements could provide shelter. The hatchlings looked at him with their strange, beautiful eyes. One of them reached out with tiny clawed fingers and tugged at the edge of his coat. It was asking for help. It was trusting him, even though he was a stranger. Even though he was a completely different kind of creature. Danny reached down and gently picked up the first hatchling. It chirped in surprise, but did not fight him. He placed it inside his suit, against his chest, and felt it press close to his heart for warmth. Then he picked up the second one and did the same. The two creatures curled together inside his coat, and he could feel their small bodies shaking as they tried to warm up. He zipped his suit closed again, leaving just enough room for them to breathe. The extra weight was awkward, and the movement of tiny claws against his skin was strange, but Danny did not care. They were alive. They were warming up. That was what mattered. He still had 3 more vents to check before his shift was done. So he checked them. He walked through the frozen darkness with 2 alien creatures sleeping against his chest. And he did his job, because the job still needed doing. When he finally returned to the airlock, the hatchlings had stopped shaking. Their breathing was slow and peaceful, like sleeping babies. Danny looked down at them through the gap in his suit and saw that their scales had changed color. They were warmer now, more golden than blue, and they glowed faintly with some kind of inner light. He did not know what they were. He did not know where they came from. He did not know what would happen when the others found out about them. But he knew one simple thing. They had been cold and scared and alone, and he had helped them. That was enough reason. That was the only reason he needed. Danny walked back into the outpost with the hatchlings hidden in his coat. He would figure out the rest tomorrow. Tonight he would keep them warm and let them sleep. That was the beginning of everything that followed. Danny kept the hatchlings secret for 3 weeks. It was not easy. They grew fast, much faster than any Earth animal, and soon they were too big to hide under his coat. He moved them to a storage room near his quarters, a place nobody used anymore because the heating system there was broken. Danny fixed the heating system himself and told no one. He fed them protein bars and dried meat from his own rations. He gave them water from his personal supply. At night, he sat with them and talked to them in a soft voice, telling them about Earth and Minnesota and the snow that fell there every winter. The hatchlings listened with their bright eyes and made small sounds that almost seemed like answers. Danny named them North and South. After the 2 directions, the wind blew on Vareth 7. North was slightly larger and more curious. She liked to explore and poke her nose into everything. South was quieter and more careful. He preferred to watch and wait before acting. Together, they were like 2 halves of the same creature, always moving together, always aware of each other. By the end of the 3rd week, they were the size of large cats. Their wings had grown stronger, and sometimes they would stretch them out and flap, lifting a few inches off the ground before falling back down. Their scales had hardened into something like armor, and their eyes had developed a glow that was visible even in bright light. They were beautiful and strange and completely impossible. Then the ship arrived. It appeared in orbit without warning, a massive vessel the size of a small moon. The outpost sensors went crazy with alarms. Director Linda Reyes called an emergency meeting, and everyone gathered in the main hall to watch the view screen. The ship belonged to something called the Galactic Oversight Council. Danny had heard of them before. They were an organization of alien species that had been watching humanity since first contact was made 20 years ago. They did not interfere with human affairs very often, but when they did, it was never good news. A beam of light shot down from the ship, and 5 figures materialized in the middle of the hall. The leader was a tall being with skin that looked like glass and arms that bent in too many places. She wore a silver robe and carried a device that hummed when she spoke. Her name was Ambassador Cathvara, and her voice was cold and sharp like ice breaking. She said that humanity had committed a grave violation. She said that protected creatures had been found on Vareth 7. She said that these creatures were called the Perithi, and their young were sacred under galactic law. She said that the hatchlings must be returned to their designated nursery world immediately, or there would be serious consequences for all of humanity. Danny stood in the back of the room, his coat bulky and suspicious. North and South were hidden inside, pressed against his chest, and they were making soft purring sounds that he hoped nobody could hear. Director Reyes tried to explain that they knew nothing about any Perithi. She said there must be some mistake, some confusion. But Kethvara was not interested in excuses. The ambassador said that their sensors had detected 2 juvenile Perithi life signatures on the planet. She said that a Perithi mother had been attacked by poachers many months ago, and before dying from her wounds, she had hidden her eggs on this frozen world. The council had been searching for those eggs ever since. Danny felt his heart sink. The mother was dead. North and South were orphans. They had been alone and freezing when he found them, with no one to care for them, no one to keep them alive. At that moment, North decided to poke her head out of Danny's coat. She yawned, showing rows of tiny, sharp teeth, and looked around the room with curious eyes. Every guard in the ambassador's escort raised their weapons. The humans in the room gasped and stepped back. Director Reyes looked at Danny with shock and confusion. Danny did not run. He did not hide. He simply put one hand on North's head and one hand on South's head, gently, the way you would calm a frightened dog. Kethvara stared at him for a long moment. Her glass-like face showed no expression, but her voice changed slightly when she spoke again. She asked if Danny had sheltered these creatures. She asked if he had done it voluntarily, knowing nothing about what they were. Danny said yes. He said he had found them freezing near a vent, and he had kept them warm. That was all. The ambassador made a sound that might have been surprise. She said that Danny did not understand what the Perithi were. She said that when they grew up, they became apex predators, the most dangerous creatures in 17 star systems. She said their fire could melt the hull of a starship. She said they were feared by every species in the galaxy. Danny looked down at North and South. They were looking back at him with complete trust, their eyes soft and warm. South made a small chirping sound and pressed closer to his chest. Danny shrugged and said, "They have been cold." The room was silent. The guards still had their weapons raised, but they seemed uncertain now. The other humans watched Danny with expressions that ranged from fear to admiration. Kethvara spoke again, slower this time. She said that the hatchlings would need to be examined by experts. She said that the council would send scientists and diplomats to determine what should be done. She said that Danny would be held responsible for anything that went wrong. Danny nodded and said that was fine. He said he would cooperate with whatever examination they needed. But he also said that he was not going to let anyone take North and South away unless they wanted to go. He said they were scared of strangers. He said they trusted him. He said he would not betray that trust, no matter what the council decided. The ambassador studied him for a long time. Then she made a gesture to her guards, and they lowered their weapons. She said that Danny was either very brave or very foolish. She said that the council would be watching closely. She said that the future of relations between humanity and the Perithi might depend on what happened next. Danny said he understood. Then he asked if the meeting was over, because it was almost time for North and South's dinner, and they got cranky when they were hungry. Nobody knew how to respond to that. The council sent their experts within a week. Scientists came from 6 different species, bringing equipment and scanners and devices that Danny could not even begin to understand. They set up a research station next to the outpost and began studying North and South with intense curiosity. Dr. Grace Howard came from Earth to represent humanity. She was a xenobiologist, which meant she studied alien life forms, and she had spent her entire career waiting for a discovery like this. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, and she treated Danny with a mixture of respect and frustration. She ran tests on the hatchlings every day. She measured their growth. She analyzed their scales. She recorded the sounds they made and tried to understand their language. She took samples of everything she could without hurting them. And at the end of each session, she would sit down with Danny and share what she had learned. The news was not simple. Grace explained that the Pirathi were one of the oldest species in the galaxy. They had existed for millions of years, long before humans had even learned to use fire. They were powerful and proud and dangerous, and they had fought wars that destroyed entire planets. The galactic community feared them, respected them, and avoided them whenever possible. But there was something else. Something that made North and South special even among their own kind. They were twins. Grace said that twin births among the Pirathi were extremely rare. Perhaps one clutch in 10,000 years would produce twins. When this happened, the twins were considered sacred, prophetic. The Pirathi believed that twin hatchlings carried the fate of their entire species within them. Whoever raised bonded twins was granted enormous power in Pirathi society. They became advisors to the great clans, respected voices in matters of war and peace. The mother of twins was honored above all others, but the mother of North and South was dead, killed by poachers who wanted to sell her scales on the black market. And the twins had bonded not to another Pirathi, but to a human maintenance technician who had simply wanted to keep them warm. Danny listened to all of this with a quiet expression. He asked Grace what bonding meant. Exactly. She explained that Pirathi young formed deep connections with their primary caregiver during the first cycle of their lives. It was biological, chemical, and emotional all at once. Once the bond formed, it could not be broken. The hatchlings would recognize their bonded parent forever, would trust them above all others, would follow them anywhere. Danny asked if this meant North and South saw him as their father. Grace said it was more complicated than that. They saw him as family, as protector, as home. They had imprinted on his heartbeat, his voice, his smell. To them, he was safety and comfort and love. Nothing in the universe could change that now. Danny was quiet for a long time. Then he looked at North and South, who were playing together in the corner of the room, chasing each other's tails and making happy sounds. He said that he would not let anyone take them away. Grace sighed. She said she understood, but the situation was bigger than his feelings. The Pirathi clans would learn about this eventually. They would want the twins returned to their own kind. They would not be happy that a human had claimed what they considered sacred. Danny said he did not claim anything. He said he had just helped two scared babies who needed someone to care for them. He said if the Pirathi wanted to be angry about that, they could come and talk to him directly. The weeks turned into months. North and South continued to grow. They were the size of large dogs now, too big to carry, but still small enough to curl up in Danny's lap when they were tired. Their wings had grown strong enough for real flight, and they would soar around the outpost, racing each other through the corridors and making the other workers nervous. They had also started breathing fire. It happened by accident the first time. South got startled by a loud noise, and a burst of blue flame shot out of his mouth and scorched the wall. Nobody was hurt, but the incident caused panic. The council representatives demanded that the twins be contained, controlled, kept away from humans. Danny refused. He said North and South were not weapons. He said they were children who were still learning to control their bodies. He said he would teach them to be careful, the same way any parent teaches a child not to play with matches. Director Reyes supported him, though she was clearly worried. The outpost had changed since the twins arrived. It was no longer just a mining facility. It had become a diplomatic station, a place where the future of human Pirathi relations would be decided. Guards from the council patrolled the halls. Scientists conducted experiments at all hours. Politicians sent messages demanding updates. Through it all, Danny continued his normal routine. He woke up early. He ate breakfast with North and South. He went to work and fixed whatever needed fixing. He came home and played with the twins, teaching them games he had played as a child in Minnesota. He sang them songs at bedtime and told them stories about Earth. The council representatives watched him with confusion. They could not understand why he acted so normally, why he treated the sacred twin hatchlings like ordinary pets, why he did not seem impressed by his own importance. Grace understood, though. She watched Danny carefully over those months, and she began to realize something that the council had missed. Danny did not care about politics. He did not care about power or prophecy or galactic relations. He cared about North and South. He cared about keeping them safe and happy and loved. Everything else was just noise. That was why the twins had bonded to him so completely. That was why they followed him everywhere, trusted him with everything, loved him more than they feared the rest of the universe. He was simple. He was honest. He was kind. And in a galaxy full of complicated creatures with complicated motives, that made him something rare and precious. The twins knew it. And soon, the Pirathi would learn it too. 6 months after Danny first found the eggs, the mother came back. Everyone had believed she was dead. The council's records said she had been killed by poachers. Her body left to rot on a distant moon while criminals stole what they could. But the Pirathi were stronger than anyone knew. Harder to kill. More determined to survive. Her name was Ashkaran, and she had spent 6 months healing from wounds that would have killed any other creature. She had spent 6 months searching for her stolen eggs, following traces of their scent across star systems, refusing to accept that they were gone forever. She had spent 6 months preparing for vengeance, her fury growing hotter than the fire in her belly. And now she stood in the sky above Vara 7, her wings blocking out the light of the twin suns, her roar shaking the walls of the outpost. She was enormous. Danny had thought North and South were impressive, but they were babies compared to their mother. Asheron was the size of a small building, her scales the color of dried blood, her eyes burning with ancient fire. When she breathed, smoke curled from her nostrils. When she moved, the ground trembled. The council ships scrambled to respond. Guards ran to their posts. Alarms screamed throughout the outpost. Everyone expected a battle, a disaster, the end of everything humanity had built on this frozen world. Danny walked outside alone. He did not wear his thermal suit. The cold hit his skin immediately, painful and sharp, but he kept walking. North and South flew beside him, their wings beating hard against the wind, their eyes locked on the giant shape descending from the sky. Ashkaran landed 50 meters away. The impact sent snow flying in all directions. She folded her massive wings and stared at the tiny human standing before her. This strange, soft creature, who smelled like her children, she spoke in the Pirathi language. A series of growls and clicks and flame-colored gestures that Danny had been studying for months. Her voice was like thunder rolling across mountains. She demanded to know who had taken her eggs. She demanded to know who had stolen her children. She demanded blood and fire and death for whoever had dared to touch what belonged to her. Danny answered in the same language, his accent terrible, but his words clear. He said that nobody had stolen her children. He said that he had found them freezing to death near a vent, abandoned and alone. He said that he had kept them warm because they were cold and scared, and that was what you did when someone needed help. Ashkaran went silent. Her great head lowered until her eye, bigger than Danny's entire body, was level with his face. He could feel the heat radiating from her, could see the flames flickering deep in her throat. She asked why. Why would a human risk his life for creatures he did not know? Why would he care for eggs that were not his own? What did he want in return? Danny thought about the question. He thought about his grandmother, who used to take in stray cats during Minnesota winters. He thought about his father, who had worked double shifts to pay for neighbors' medical bills. He thought about all the small kindnesses he had seen growing up, the way people helped each other simply because helping was the right thing to do. He told Ashkaran that he did not want anything. He said that North and South had been scared and alone, and he had helped them because that was what you did. It was simple. It was obvious. It did not need a complicated explanation. North and South landed beside Danny. They were so much smaller than their mother, so young and fragile compared to her ancient strength. But they did not cower. They pressed against Danny's sides, one on each hip, and looked up at Ashkaran without fear. The great dragon stared at her children. She stared at the human they had chosen. She saw the way they leaned against him, trusted him, loved him. She saw that they were healthy and happy and unafraid. She made a sound deep in her throat. It was not anger. It was something else, something that Danny could not identify at first. Then he realized it was grief. She said that she had failed them. She said that a true mother would have died protecting her eggs, would never have let poachers get close enough to wound her. She said that she had been too weak, too slow, too foolish. She said that her children had almost died because of her failure. Danny shook his head. He said that she had survived. He said that she had fought her way back from death itself to find them. He said that any mother who could do that was not weak. She was the strongest creature he had ever seen. Ashkaran studied him for a long time. The flames in her throat dimmed slowly. The tension in her massive body began to relax. She said that Danny was strange. She said that humans were confusing creatures who did not make sense. She said that she should hate him for bonding with her children, for taking what should have been hers. But she did not hate him. She saw how North and South loved him. She saw how he had kept them alive, kept them safe, kept them warm. She saw that he had done what she could not do, and he had done it without asking for anything in return. She bowed her great head to the ground. She said that Danny would come with them. She said that he would be clan, would be family, would help her raise the twins as they grew. This was not a request. This was not a choice. The bond he had formed with her children could not be broken, and she would not try to break it. Danny looked back at the outpost. He saw the faces of his fellow humans watching through the windows, saw the council ships hovering nervously in the sky, saw the world he had known for almost a year. Then he looked at North and South, at the trust in their eyes, at the way they pressed against him like he was the safest place in the universe. He asked Ashkaran if he could finish his shift first. He said he still had some vents to check, and he did not like leaving work unfinished. The ancient dragon made a sound that might have been laughter. She said yes. She said she would wait. Danny nodded and turned back toward the outpost. North and South followed him, chirping happily, as if nothing unusual had happened at all. Behind them, Ashkaran watched. And for the first time in 6 months, the fire in her heart was not burning for vengeance. It was burning with hope. The years passed like seasons on distant worlds. Danny left Vera 7 with Ashkaran and the twins, traveling across the galaxy to the Pirathi homeworld, a place of volcanic mountains and rivers of fire that would have killed any normal human within minutes. But Danny was not a normal human anymore. He was clan. He was family. And the Pirathi protected their own. They built him a home in the heart of their territory, a place where the temperature was warm but not deadly, where the air was filtered and clean, where he could live among dragons without burning alive. North and South stayed close to him always, even as they grew larger and more powerful with each passing year. By the time Danny was 40, the twins had become magnificent creatures. North stretched nearly 30 meters from nose to tail, her scales shimmering blue and gold in the firelight. South was slightly smaller but faster, his silver scales flashing like lightning when he flew. They had learned to control their flames, to speak both Piracy and English, to understand the complicated politics of the clans. But they still came to Danny every night to sleep beside him, curling their massive bodies. Around his small dwelling like living walls of warmth, the Piracy had not known what to make of Danny at first. A human living among them was strange enough. A human who had bonded with the sacred twins was impossible to understand. Some of the elders had been angry, had demanded that the soft alien be sent away before he corrupted the prophecy. Others had been curious, watching Danny with ancient eyes, trying to understand what made him different. Ashkaran had defended him fiercely. She told the clans that Danny had earned his place, that he had saved what she could not save, that he belonged with them by right of love and sacrifice. She stood beside him at council meetings and flew with him across the burning skies and taught him the old songs that Pirathi had sung since the beginning of time. They raised the twins together. It was strange at first, the ancient dragon and the human working side by side, learning to understand each other's ways. Ashkaran taught North and South how to hunt, how to fight, how to breathe fire that could melt starships. Danny taught them how to be gentle, how to listen, how to care for creatures weaker than themselves. The twins grew up understanding both worlds. They were fierce when they needed to be fierce, but they were also kind when kindness was called for. They did not see weakness in mercy. They did not think softness was shameful. They had learned from their human father that strength and gentleness could exist together, that the bravest thing was sometimes the simplest thing. As the years went on, Danny became something of a legend among the Pirathi, the human who raised the sacred twins, the soft creature who walked among dragons without fear. He attended hatching ceremonies and naming rituals. He sat in councils where decisions about war and peace were made. He taught young Pirathi how to make hot chocolate, which became strangely popular despite its complete unsuitability for fire-breathing creatures. The Galactic Council watched all of this with amazement. The relationship between humanity and the Pirathi had been tense for centuries, full of fear and mistrust on both sides. But Danny changed that. His presence among the dragons proved that the two species could understand each other, could live together, could even love each other. Diplomats came from Earth to study what Danny had done. Scientists wrote papers about interspecies bonding. Politicians talked about the economic benefits of the new alliance. But they all missed the point. They looked for complicated explanations, strategic advantages, hidden motives. Danny had not been strategic. He had just been kind. He lived among the Pirathi for 43 years. He never married a human woman or returned to Earth permanently. He said that North and South were all the family he needed, and he meant it. He raised 17 clutches of hatchlings with Ashkaran, each one learning the same lessons he had taught the twins. He watched his children grow into leaders of their clans, respected and powerful and wise. He grew old slowly, as humans do. His hair turned white. His back began to bend. His hands, which had once fixed machines and held shivering hatchlings, became wrinkled and spotted with age. But his eyes remained warm, and his voice remained gentle, and his heart remained open to any creature who needed care. When Danny was 87 years old, he knew that his time was ending. He called North and South to his dwelling, and they came immediately, flying across the burning landscape faster than they had ever flown before. They landed beside his home and shrunk their massive bodies as small as they could, pressing close to him the way they had when they were tiny hatchlings hidden in his coat. Danny told them he was proud of them. He told them they had become everything he had hoped they would be. He told them to remember the lessons he had taught them, to be fierce when necessary, but kind whenever possible, to help creatures who were scared and alone even when it was dangerous to do so. North and South stayed with him through the night. They kept him warm with their breath, the same way he had kept them warm so many years ago. When the sun rose over the volcanic mountains, Danny closed his eyes and did not open them again. The Pirathi mourned for a full cycle of their moon. Every clan sent representatives to the ceremony. Dragons filled the sky from horizon to horizon, breathing fire in honor of the small human who had changed their world. Ashkaran sang the death song herself, her voice carrying across the mountains and valleys, telling the story of Danny Marsh to everyone who could hear. They carved his name into their most sacred stone, the place where only the greatest heroes were remembered. But they did not write his name in Pirathi letters. They wrote it in English, the language he had spoken when he first promised to keep 2 freezing hatchlings warm. The words were simple. The words were true. Danny Marsh. He kept us warm. Years later, when historians from across the galaxy studied the alliance between humans and Pirathi, they would look for complicated explanations. They would analyze political factors and economic incentives and strategic calculations. They would write long papers full of difficult words and impressive theories. But the Pirathi knew the truth. They told their children the real story, the simple story, the story that mattered. A human found 2 hatchlings dying in the cold. He did not know they were rare. He did not know they were sacred. He did not know that saving them would change the course of history. He only knew that they were scared and small and alone. So he put them inside his coat. He kept them warm. And he went back to work. That was what humans did. That was who they were. They helped because helping was right, not because they expected reward. They showed kindness to strangers because kindness mattered, not because it was safe. The galaxy was full of powerful species, ancient civilizations, creatures who could destroy worlds with a thought. But none of them were quite like humans. None of them had that strange, stubborn, beautiful habit of caring about things that could not care for themselves. Danny Marsh had been an ordinary man, a maintenance technician from Minnesota who fixed things that were broken and checked vents in frozen wastelands. He had not been special or powerful or important, but he had been kind. And in the end, that was more than enough.